I want to start a series where I give advice to people who are doing or thinking about doing a working holiday visa in Australia. And it's not about if you should do it or not do it. This is if you have the plans to or you're already here, and things that you can have in mind while you're on your experience, and things that might help you along the way or make your experience better. Things that I have learned from firsthand experience, a lot of what I found out after the fact just by doing it, and also things that I maybe wish that I did a little bit different, although I wouldn't change much about my experience. And this idea started because I have a cousin who just moved to Sydney, and she has things lined up with starting her visa and, where she's living and work. And I had like a piece of advice pop into my mind, and, thinking if I could go back, I would do this right now. Like, I'm looking back at my whole experience of my first year. So I did 1 year in Sydney and in Queensland, and I'm now starting my second visa. And there's certain things where I'm like, wow, I'm so almost jealous. Like, I miss when I was in her position where everything is brand new and, you can't really go wrong. Like, you just get here. And by the end of my visa, like, I was so sad. I was like, this experience is over. And once that experience is over, I think the hardships of life kind of come back and you have to find your way again. And so I just gave her some advice, because it was advice that like I wish that I had in order to set myself up for after that initial experience. So I want to talk about the first piece of advice that I gave her that I would have done different. And that is not to plan too much out. So when you move to a new place, whether you're with a friend or not, you want to have things figured out. Like, it almost feels like this supportive blanket of, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know how I'm going to make friends. I know how I'm going to make money. And I know where my life is going, or I know where this experience is going. And to an extent, you have to have a plan. You have to find a place to live. You have to know how you're going to pay your bills. You have ideas of where you want to go on trips. But that is where I would stop yourself, because looking back, I had planned a lot of travel. And later, when that travel came up in some situations, I was like, oh, I'm really just enjoying like where I am, or I kind of don't feel like spending money on that, or this new opportunity came up. And so I think like in the first 4 months when me and my friends were living in Sydney, we did have to actually kind of push ourselves to step outside of our routine, which I think got a little bit dull because we were just in freshwater in the northern beaches of Sydney. And something I'm happy that we did was we're like, well, we really want to go to the Blue Mountains, or this camping trip came up. When the camping trip came up, it was like, oh, but should we make money? And again, trying to plan out like if that made sense or not. But this was like a group of friends who invited us to go, and it was kind of like a once in a lifetime opportunity to go camping with Australians. So there's this back and forth of taking advantage of when opportunities come, because you don't actually know when you'll be invited to go on something again. And I think be ready to just accept those things. I was like, well, this is why I'm here, to have these Australian experiences. And so we ended up going, and it was great. And I never regretted a trip that I did. But then on the opposite side, I felt like I was in a rut again when I was in, I guess, my second half of my working holiday visa. So I was living on Magnetic Island, a remote island. I was doing my 88 days. And 3 months into it, of the 5 months of living there, I couldn't wait to leave. Looking back now, it was an amazing experience. But in the time that I was there, starting out, it was really rough. I don't think I was meeting that close of friends. I was kind of sick of being in the same routine. I felt very isolated there. And I set up all these plans for the end of my visa to almost like fill that time. So I had 2 people from the US coming to meet me who I planned trips with, another friend from Australia to go plan to get to Asia. And then in that last month that I was on the island and I knew that I was leaving, I kind of like let all of those thoughts go, and I started becoming closer with my friends. I started dating someone. I started really, really loving work as I had new coworkers. I started actually hanging out with my coworkers, and I got into this routine. And, that's like 4 to 5 months in, and that's really like the sweet spot of when you start to live somewhere. But then when you're living on a visa like this, that is almost feels like a long time. So I didn't expect to like the island. And then the last month of my visa, I filled it up with all these plans that I couldn't cancel because they involved other people. And I just thought, yes, I'm so happy I had those experiences. But if I could go back in that time, I was like, oh, I really just want to stay here. Like, I'm really enjoying myself. I don't know why I'm pushing myself to go do something and experience something else, because all of a sudden this experience I had no idea I was going to have is actually what I want to be doing. And then I feel like when I was traveling, it was actually 2 months of travel. Like, I had planned to go to Japan and Vietnam and Thailand, which turned into another trip, which was great in the moment. But yeah, I felt, again, looking back, I love those experiences, but in the time of it, I felt like not in the right headspace to even be doing that type of traveling. I felt a bit overwhelmed and stressed. I felt like my body was run down, and I had just gone through so many emotional things with my visa ending. And that's where I say, do not make set in stone plans. I mean, it gets kind of hard because you have family members and friends who want to visit, and that's great. Those could be awesome experiences. Maybe plan like 1 or 2 and not that far out. I told a lot of friends, like, I don't know where I'm going to be. And so I don't want to make set plans because 1, I don't want to disappoint you, but 2, like, that's part of this experience. And so, yeah, I wouldn't plan it out too much because you really do not know what's going to happen. And then especially when it gets to the end of the visa, I never would have predicted at the start of the year that I would want to actually do a second visa and stay in Australia. And if I had just kind of gone with the flow a bit more, I probably could have extended my stay on the island. And who knows what would have happened? I mean, everything happens for a reason. So, now I think like coming back with my second visa kind of pushed me to move to a new city, which is awesome. And I'm happy with how things have turned out. And I'm so happy I spent time with family. But it was like this 4 months that I was in the US, I was like, wow, I wish I just had like extended my visa and kind of gone with what I was feeling. Because a few months before my visa ended, I had this like, oh my gosh, I need to make a decision. Like, I was like, I have to book a flight to go back to the US. I have to decide if I want to extend my visa immediately or apply outside of the country. And I was stressing myself out so much. And I think that it's hard to just let those things go. But there will come times where you should just wait and see what happens. And again, this kind of depends on the type of person you are in the specific situation. In the end, everything works out, but I do think that if I didn't set such hard plans, like, I wouldn't have gone through so much distress because I was having these amazing experiences, but then I feel like my brain was somewhere else. And I had 5 months of like very, very hard emotional distress because I was like living out certain actions and decisions that I had made while my mind and soul were going in another direction. Okay, on a lighter note, that was my big one. I think the biggest thing that you can do that will give you the most experiences is living in share houses and living with other people and multiple different types of share houses. So something that I didn't expect to happen when I did this visa was the types of things that I learned about how people live and how that's contributed to me personally and how I can contribute to other people. Very basic, simple, like seeing how other people eat and seeing how other people clean. So living with other people, you see their habits, you see, how they do laundry, how they mop floors, how they keep their home tidy. And that it was so interesting to me because I grew up one way, saw how, my parents, like their methods of cleaning, which always comes from something, right? The way my mom's mom cleaned, and I have these ways of like cleaning a house. And I know it sounds so random, but in the last house that I lived in, my one roommate, she had this really structured way of, all right, on these days, I'm doing this for the house, I'm doing that. And I think like when you're becoming an adult, there's these little things that you don't realize you wish someone had taught you about how to live. So as easy as like a cleaning schedule, like that has helped me become more of a person and an adult than like any job or life experience I had before this has given me. And it's things that you don't think about. And same with like my friend I was traveling with last year was so healthy. The things she bought at the grocery store and the way she ate, it helped me become a healthier person. And especially when you make friends and you're living with people from other countries, they have different diets and they make different types of foods, and you become open to different things that you can eat and the ways that you cook. And that has, again, like, just contributed to me overall as a person. Like, I cook so much more now. I never cooked before I moved to Australia. And it's like these little things where I feel like I've become more of an adult at 28 years old than when I was working a corporate job, living in New York City. And that's just like those are cool experiences, and you'll get life lessons that you never knew that you could have. That kind of leads me into my last two pieces of advice. So I'm going to start off with dating. I think when you are in a certain environment, it affects how you date and who you date. And being somewhere like Australia, you meet people from all over. You are changing as a person. Those people are changing. And I think that it's really important to keep your mind open to connecting with people that you might not think that you would connect with or be attracted to, and just really be open to the possibility of anything when it comes to your romantic life, especially because you are now in a situation where you're meeting other people who are also backpackers and have the same type of mindset as you and the same type of values, even if they live all the way on the other side of the world. And that could be people living in Australia, and it could also be people from another continent who are living in Australia. And I think it's just a really cool and great opportunity to learn more about yourself and more about what you want in a relationship and from other people. And I found connections along the way that I was like, wow, yeah, I never really imagined this coming into my life. I think especially, you have this set idea of who you want to end up with or who you want to date. And when you're in a situation like this, it can completely change, your outlook on that. And that's very similar to, I guess, the piece of advice I have as far as making friends. So coming to Australia, as far as making friends and dating, I thought I was mostly excited to meet Australians, which I've met so many. I have friends who are Australian, and I learned so many things from them, and I absolutely loved it. But I didn't realize how many people from other countries I also would gain really valuable friendships with, because if you think about it, like, I am more similar to those people who are also doing a visa, no matter where they're from, than Australians, because they are living away from home. Have the same life philosophies for the most part. A lot of times they're looking for the same type of experience. They're in the same place in their life that I also am at. They're at a crossroads of, do I move back home? I miss family. Do I want to stay here? Having all these types of revelations that I'm having. And I have found the best connections with friends from Europe and South America and Asia than a lot of other friendships that I've had in my life. And of course, friendships at home, they're just different. Like, they're connected to who you are, your experience growing up. But you make really, really fast friends when you are traveling, because you form this deeper connection and because you're meeting so many people. And so when you click with someone, it's going to be probably for a deeper reason, and someone who makes you feel really at home and comfortable when you are so far away from friends and family and where you grew up. So I would say put yourself in situations where you are meeting other backpackers. The first 4 to 5 months of my working holiday visa, I was, again, in the northern beaches of Sydney. I was around a lot of people who have lived in Sydney their whole life, some who, haven't really even traveled that much. And I loved that experience because I learned a lot about Australia. I learned a lot about how people grow up in Australia, their school experience, the lingo. I mean, it's amazing. But then when I lived in Queensland, I met a lot more people from other countries, and that's when I really started to feel this like deep connection to my experience in Australia, because I was having conversations about simple daily things about how, I view what I want to do with a career or relationships or how I want to live in a community. I was aligning with that on these friends from, Europe and South America. And I think that was probably my biggest takeaway of my entire experience. And so I would say move to areas where there's a lot of backpackers working and live in, again, share houses. I'll probably make more of these as I have more realizations that come or experiences that I have, just because I think that, yeah, it's really important. So see you next time.